Welcome in to another chapter of Haunted History. I'm Tim Renaud.
And I'm Christina Lobo.
It's not your typical ghost tour. Paranormal investigators based right here in Charleston, taking groups along with them as they venture into the Holy City's many haunted locations in an interactive ghost hunting experience. Joining us in the WCBD Plus Streaming Center is Nick McGurr, lead paranormal investigator with Stories in the Cemetery. Nick, welcome. Tell us a little about how Stories in the Cemetery began and how you have been operating in the Charleston area.
Oh, well, that's actually a pretty loaded question. So I guess how I began, I've been researching and looking into the paranormal for about 15 years or so. I've been writing about it for over 20, to be quite honest. And then as far as the tours go, it just kind of evolved into, I had a podcast and kind of said, okay, I want to teach people how to do this for real instead of what they're seeing on TV. And here we are, 6 years later. It actually runs pretty smooth, and I've evolved the equipment to, what the guests are looking for, and show them how it really goes down on an investigation versus just a TV show.
And Nick, what inspired you to become a paranormal investigator?
Wow, another loaded question. So as far as, I guess, researching it, and writing books about the afterlife, it just kind of became real life. And, you start looking into psychic mediums and the validity of those people, and you start to realize, like, some of them are pretty legit. And I found one who's now a longtime friend who was working with me on investigations, and I was just going to write a book about him. And really what it turned out to be were many investigations without equipment other than a voice recorder just to validate his findings. And I would just literally take him to locations where he didn't even know where we were going, just to see what he would pick up, and we would learn the history later from the owner of the properties.
Now, you've been doing this for some time, so do you remember your very first paranormal experience?
First experience versus investigation.
Or tell us about both.
So I guess you never forget, your first, true investigation, so we'll start there. So living in the Myrtle Beach area, we decided we were going to go after the Alice Flagg myth and legend up there. And, I didn't tell the psychic medium what we were going to be doing other than you need to wear a jacket because we're going to be outside. And basically, he started picking up on things right away. And then once we got to the location of where this legend takes place in Horry County, he said, we don't need to be here. We need to be somewhere else. And I said, where's the somewhere else? And he literally said, I don't know, but it's at another site that is probably about 30 to 40 miles from here. And what we found out was that the true urban legend of Alice Flagg is that she's not buried at the open site to the public, is that she's buried on a private property. He proved to be true. So I was able to validate all of his findings, especially with the things he was picking up on, and through research, I was able to really go through and validate what we found. So it was pretty cool to actually see it come to fruition instead of just running around and there's a ghost kind of mentality. As far as my first paranormal anything that's happened, I guess I've always kind of lived in older homes throughout my entire life. So there's always creaks through the houses, and coming from the north, those houses it can be a little older because they can withstand the weather. And, just kind of grew up with it. I had, a mother that was, we'll just say a little bit on the religious side, but she was, always dismissive. But she wouldn't deny that they were there, but she would just say, don't worry about it. Just some few steps that, up in the attic, not a big deal. So that, I guess, just even as a kid, you kind of what's going on? What's happening on the other side that we can't see?
Well, Nick, was there a moment from those earlier days where you experienced something that made you think, wait a minute, is this real?
I think that would really truly start when I met the psychic medium. So it wasn't until I moved to the South Carolina area where I attended, it was a group party for, the psychic to kind of read the room. And when we walked in, he knew nothing of us, and we were all, from, the Ohio area, from a very steel city. So he kind of walked in and he's like, I'm tasting metal. I don't know what's going on with you guys. I don't know any of you here. I don't know anything about you, but I'm tasting metal. And then he just went on to kind of pinpoint certain things about each one of us, and they were things that he wouldn't have known. So for me specifically, he mentioned a recently passed grandparent, and something about her that there's no way that he would have ever have known those things. So that was really my turning point to say, okay, I need to dive deeper, I need to get some equipment, and I need to work with this guy. And he was the psychic that I chose to work with me on those locations without equipment, to write the book about him specifically.
Well, you mentioned equipment. It seems like at least, that there's a lot of equipment that can be used, and likely instances where your mind can kind of play tricks on you. For someone out there who may be interested in paranormal investigation, what kind of training or background would you say is needed?
Wow. I think the true training is within oneself, of not believing anything at face value, looking into verifying one piece of equipment versus another. Never use one piece of equipment at a time. I always have kind of a law of which devices need to be used together, even at a bare minimum. So if I was doing an investigation on my own, there are 4 key pieces that I'm going to use just to verify one piece against another one. But as far as training goes, I mean, there's really no formal training for this. It's a matter of mixing in what your skill set is, whether it's through your education or career, and finding a way to incorporate that into what can we learn from you, so that way we can understand things a little bit further. And those are the types of folks that I love to collaborate with, because that's exactly what I do. I'm a writer and researcher, so me diving into histories after an investigation is where I can validate things and verify and look at the data and say, this is why this happened, even though I didn't know about it in real time. So again, there's no formal training. It's a matter of find your passion and mix it in with ghosts. Like, that's really the best way to put it.
How do your friends and family react to your line of work?
Friends and most family are envious, so they are usually big fans of what I do. As far as friends go, I mean, everybody knows me as the writer, so it's no surprise that, with the content of fiction that I write, that this is, a chosen career, that I dive into ghost hunting and researching and validating and really getting into the nitty-gritty of why certain things happen, and again, trying to debunk a lot of the TV shows that are out there.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Our conversation continues in a moment. Stay with us. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. We're here with Nick McGurr, lead paranormal investigator with Stories in the Cemetery. Nick, where are some of the places in Charleston, that you feel paranormal activity is at its highest?
So, and this is going through all of my 15 years of investigating, my favorite place is a dumpy, dirty parking lot that we have here downtown Charleston. It's probably the most active. And it used to be the Eliza Lucas Pinckney Mansion. So for some odd reason, I've been investigating that space for 6 years, and I could probably write a book just on the things that I've learned from the evidence that has come from that location, of things that I didn't know about preamble to going into the space on a nightly basis. But there are some nights where we don't have any activity from it, but I do notice that there is heightened activity around certain, I usually call them trigger dates, so anniversaries, birthdays, death dates, certain days of a major event in one of the family's lives. So for example, we're in the month of October. We've seen just last night that there was quite a few little subtleties to one of the sons of Eliza, who was in the Revolutionary War battle, the Battle of Camden. So we're getting closer and closer to his actual death date, I believe. So it doesn't surprise me that we're starting to see some of those extra pieces come through. But that location is forever going to be on my interactive ghost hunting experience. It's just one place that I won't change, just because it's been that active, and I've built that relationship with that spirit. So when I walk in, my name is often heard. But that is probably my favorite place, and nobody really knows about it unless, of course, they've been on the tour.
Have you ever had to leave a location because it felt too dangerous? And can you explain that situation?
I've had locations where somebody was feeling a bit ill, EMF can cause a lot of different human reactions. So that's electromagnetic fields. And when we have high EMF in certain locations, people can feel a bit dizzy. They can feel the chills, so to speak, because their body reacts to it. It's basically just, pulsing electricity through the air. So it can have an effect on our body in general. And that Pinckney Mansion site has actually, we've had to leave that space once or twice just from some really high spikes that have come through and has caused, either a headache on one of my guests or, somebody, felt like they were almost going to pass out. So again, it's always making sure we have the right equipment to monitor those things and to react to it quickly when they do occur.
What's the strangest or maybe a piece of evidence that you felt like you can't explain that you have captured?
I can't say that I can't explain it because I can. I studied this long enough to where I understand what's going on. So I'll just say a few months ago, and this is a very common location, with any of the ghost tours here in Charleston, and it's the Philadelphia Alley location. We were using a thermal imaging camera, and what had happened was it was during the summertime, so we had this heat anomaly, moving across the screen. And if you know anything about thermodynamics, heat is not supposed to move that way, especially in a blob formation. So with the video, I actually was studying it frame by frame to see if it was going to take any type of shape. And when it moved out of the way through the alleyway, there was actually a blackened figure at the end of it, wearing kind of like what we would call almost like a doctor's coat. You can kind of just see the outline of it. And for me, and it was just there for a split second. If I wasn't going frame by frame, I wouldn't have been able to capture this full figure just standing at us. And with the other evidence that happened that particular night, we had things coming through spirit boxes that said, "We're watching," or "I'm coming with you," that kind of mentality. But the next night on the next tour, I actually had a fireman on the tour who's used to using a FLIR thermal imaging camera. And I had the 3-minute clip on my phone. So I just handed it over to him before we even reached the space. And I said, "You just tell me what you see. I'm not going to point it out." And he's like, "Well, first off, that heat anomaly shouldn't be acting that way. And you have a figure standing at the end of whatever this road is." Again, he had never seen Philadelphia Alley before because we hadn't been to that part of my tour yet. So it was validating all the way around, not only from the evidence that I captured from the other devices, but also from somebody who's more familiar with thermodynamics than I am, because that's what his day job is.
Well, can you share a case where you went in expecting nothing and were surprised by some of the activity there?
Yes, actually. I'll use another tour location. It's kind of off limits now. There are things where the city gets rezoned. But the first night that I have ever walked into Washington Park is very interesting because at times when I have smaller groups, because it's too cold or it's off season, I'll just ask my guests if they're okay with just, let's go see what happens over here, or let's see if we get any activity on this location, just to have some fun and kind of show we're not scripted, the ghosts kind of dictate what we do. So I had 2 guests that night, and we walked into Washington Park, and the young lady using the spirit box immediately heard the year 1828 and the name Henry. I was using a separate device that provides words on a screen, and it gave me the name Tim. Well, lo and behold, it is a place where there is a bust of the poet Henry Timrod, who happens to be born in the year 1828. So we had other things that happened that night, but it was kind of I didn't even know who we were looking for, because a lot of tours used to go through there speaking of another ghost story and not realizing that maybe Henry Timrod is truly where the ghost story lies, is where he wanted to come through and talk. So Henry has remained on the tour, but in a different location.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well, you kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but people often talk about being cold or too hot, or maybe someone is watching them. So how would you describe to the audience today the feeling of being in a place where you can sense activity?
So I try not to put the feels, so to speak, into the tour at all. So when I'm teaching people how to go through this, I kind of rely heavily on the equipment. Unless, of course, it's something that is going to cause somebody physical illness or an ailment. They're going to pass out. They're getting those chills. Last night we had a guest that claimed to have chills. And it's not that I brushed it off, but it was a matter of she also had very high EMF at that point in time. So she didn't get them again. But I also didn't bring it to, it just put it kind of like in the Rolodex of like, okay, she might be susceptible to higher EMF. And we're going to see how this works. I just didn't want to keep causing like, how are you feeling now? Are you getting more chills? The more attention that I bring to it, the more she's going to get them. It's a mental status at that point. But there are places you can walk into, literally, and you get those goosebumps, and you get a little bit of that dizziness. But at the same time, I wait to see what the equipment's going to do. Is it my mental state that's causing this because I know that this place is supposed to be scary, or is it because there is something physically affecting me?
All right, we're going to take another quick break. Stay with us. You're watching Haunted History on WCBD Plus. Welcome back. Are you interested in a paranormal investigation? Well, Stories in the Cemetery offers a unique experience where you get to be an investigator right here in Charleston. Nick, can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what it all entails?
Sure. And I have to, I guess, preface this with it's not necessarily just a tour. I don't even like to use the word tour, and I use the word experience for sure. So first off, it's not timed. It's not your typical 90-minute ghost tour. You hear some histories. Obviously, we hear history, but it's based off of the research that I've done for these locations, and also what the ghosts have filled in the gaps from me investigating them and teaching me some things along the way. But what really goes on here is I'm teaching my guests where they can use my equipment, the things that they're seeing on TV and YouTube, and showing them in real time how it correlates and works with the other pieces of equipment. I've designed the entire experience to where no matter the number of guests from 2 to 10, I know which pieces of equipment to bring, so I know like how they're going to collaborate with one another. So the higher the number gets, obviously there's some devices out there that are still in test mode. So that 10th guest is kind of my test subject, so to speak, where they get to give me the feedback. How does this work? How does it feel? That kind of mentality. But I take folks I have kind of a staple route, but sometimes I've noticed where it's what I call bleed over, where I'm getting communication or something coming from another part of town that's nearby. So if we're at one location, I'm gonna be like, oh, that's not the ghost I just told you about. Let's go over here across the street and let me show you we'll see if we get any more communication from David, and kind of see if he wants to come through a little bit further. Instead of the ghost that I just talked about. So sometimes things can go awry, and this normally lasts between 2 to 2.5 hours. But I mean, let's face it. I mean, it can go all the way up to 3 hours if the activity is high. So I don't time it, but it is an overall experience. There's a new experiment at every new location, just based off of what type of ghost we're working with. I like to break out different pieces of equipment, swap something with what I've already assigned. And just kind of show folks like how this really goes down. And then they get a full collective report the very next day with all of the media that was recorded from all paranormal cameras, spirit boxes, and of course, all of my notes that go into it to show how haunted their investigation actually was. And I'm not afraid to say when we have a light night. Again, the ghosts reveal that, not me. And again, most people that have been on the tour where it's been a light night, they appreciate the honesty. So I can't make things up. I'm not here to make mountains out of molehills. Just certain nights are lighter than others. And let's face it, last night, I had a fantastic night. It was one of the highest scores I've seen in a long time. So that's really what the tour entails, is using the equipment, learning real actual history, and then getting the full report back the next day.
Well, I want to talk about that because I think that this is so awesome, the fact that you actually give people the findings and you go through, you give them the data and to back up everything that you've been seeing or they've been experiencing. I just think that is such an amazing part of this. It's so different what you get from other tours that can happen and things that can happen in the Charleston area. So how often do people come back after viewing their findings and say, okay, I've got to go back, I've got to learn more?
So as far as repeat guests, it happens quite often. I have quite a few families that are here local, not necessarily tourists coming through, where they'll take this 4, 5, 6 times a year because it's different every single night. I can't control the activity. All I do is I go back to their previous investigation that they took with me. I look to see what pieces of equipment I assign to them to make sure that they're going to get something different. So that way I can at least have that much control. Like, hey, you didn't use this camera. Why don't we try you on a spirit box this time and see how that works? But yeah, it's quite often that I see repeat. I've had people take this tour literally back-to-back nights. Just because, and they've gotten 2 totally different scores. So one night, the first night was a lighter night, and they're like, can we try this again? Absolutely. I got 2 spots open for you tomorrow, and then they end up with an average or an above average the next night. Again, it changes and varies nightly.
And with these findings, they get them within 24 hours. So kind of tell us about the process of going through those findings.
Sure. So the findings are a huge part of this, obviously. So for a researcher like myself, like I want this data as much as the guest does, because I am measuring the moon phase, because there's a moon study that I use for one of my workbooks that I publish every year. And I'm keeping track of the UV lighting that's bouncing off of the moon. There's a scientific formula that I got from my partner over in California, because that's his main study. And then I collect all of the media, post it up to my website, and then I review it all and add notes and links for the guest to be able to verify. Now, I'm only spot checking it. So I'm not going to go through. If I have a full team of 10 people, my maximum amount of people that I'll take out, they're going to have between 12 to 15 hours worth of media. I'm not going to go through all 12 to 15 hours of that media. I'm going to spot check it between 2 to 3 hours and leave the rest of it to them. And then I kind of have a scoring system that's recognized internationally, where I tally everything up based off of the scoring system and put that score at the top. And if it's a low night, all of the best scores for that month are listed at the top of the page. So those guests from the lower nights can see what a higher night actually looked like. And it is separated by month, and it's all downloadable for the guest to keep as a keepsake. So that's really the process. As I'm spot checking it, it takes me between 2 to 3 hours.
And for those interested, how can they join one of your investigations?
Easiest way is go straight to storiesinthecemetery.com. There's a check availability button right at the top of the page. You can see what schedule and availability is there. Obviously, through the month of October, we're always busy because it's spooky month. So tickets can be very limited very, very fast.
And we're just about out of time for this episode, but we'll be back with part 2, where Christina joins Nick for a paranormal investigation in the field. So stay tuned. For now, I'm Tim Renaud.
And I'm Christina Lobo. We'll see you on the other side.